Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now do the bingo numbers because of the sound of this end of the room. Hey, welcome to a little Venturefest South forum. Thank you for joining us. I hope that the sound here is easy on your ears and you find what we're going to be talking about a bit interesting, because we want to share a few ideas in a slightly different context this morning. Lots of themes you will have heard flying around before, especially if you're a technical person, and we're going to try and recontextualize them just a bit for discussion and fun. My name is Timo Peach. I'm a creative director and a music maker, and I guess everything that I do is somewhere on the spectrum between art and business, where I think interesting, connecty things happen. And I'm going to be introducing a few insight specialists, I'll call them this morning, because that sounds professional. Looking at a few different themes along our title, Disruption and Citizenry 2050. There's been a bit of disruption lately, and today was going to be a very disruptive day for the UK, and it's not over yet. And either way, I didn't think it was going to be. So let's think about what the trends of our living and working with technology and being humans might look like. I'd like to introduce our first guest. He's Angelo Appa. He is the Technical Sales and Business Development Director from Lenovo. Would you please give a big warm welcome for Angelo?
Here's the slipper. Thanks over home.
Have you seen the bit in the movie where Freddy kind of breaks?
Go for it.
Terrible with those things.
You look a natural.
Morning, everyone. Morning. All right? All right at the back? No, all right, never mind. So I thought I'd present a really dry title to give you all the opportunity to go to sleep right now. Stop sleeping. So, what this chart says... Wake up. What this chart says is that quite a while ago, God invented radio. And it took a long time for people to decide to listen to it. Years. Years. And then, a bit later on, the devil invented Twitter. And it didn't take very long at all. Huge numbers of people suddenly got interested in twitting at each other. So much so that you can barely hear yourself think if you try and read it now. So the rate of change within our lives, with technology as the thing that underpins that, is accelerating and accelerating and accelerating. So we have to be thinking in a very different way when we are thinking about our business ideas. Not just about how we take them forward for today and the speed with which they will be taken on, but also how quickly next year will the person that does something slightly different, are they going to overtake you if you don't keep it going at a very, very fast rate? Now, you will very often hear people talk about a number of things that are changing due to technology in our lives. And only one or two of them have really made a massive difference. The internet was one. How many years has the internet been going for now? 30 years. 30 years. I remember sitting in this auditorium looking at this person in the company that I was working for at the time, and he said, there's this fantastic new thing, it's called the internet. And he was the archetypal techie. He'd got the hair, the beard, the pullover with the tea stains, and the cords. Got the whole thing. And the sandals with the socks. He had them all. It's brilliant. And he said, this internet thing, it's amazing. You're going to be able to look things up. One day, you're even going to be able to buy things. And we were like, no. It's never going to be fast enough for that. He says, and this company, I've just bought these cords. And we're like, we can tell. They don't fit. But the thing that I think is going to be bigger than the internet, which is a crazy thing to say, I know, is this one. 5G. So today, every single person in here will have at least one phone, and the chances are you'll be on 4G. And it's fairly quick, right? 5G is 100 times faster. 100 times. Why does that matter? Well, the government's about to spend, and has been spending, billions of pounds on HS2. I live just outside Crewe. I am the perfect demographic for that product. With 5G, why would I need to leave my study? Why would anybody? Well, I mean, we could have a meeting the size of this one on video screens 100 inches across and not need to leave our study at home. Environmental benefits, time benefits, work-life balance benefits. Why on earth would I want to sit on the M6 at 50 miles an hour in the roadworks to get down here in 4 hours when I could be talking to you on a screen the size of that wall from my phone with no wired connection? Start to think about the implications of that speed, because it will change absolutely everything. And the important thing is that you, as entrepreneurs here today and innovators here today, are thinking about how you can use that speed moving forward, because the speed is going to make everything very, very different. So coming back to that, you know, because I'm that old, I'm over there somewhere when it came to the internet. We're now here where we have a task-based internet. What that means is that, for example, you go into London, you got to get onto the tube, you pull out your phone, you look at the tube app, task-based internet. I have a task, I'm using it to deliver that task. That's where we're at today. We're over here. All this stuff, that's all dead. Just going and looking for things, everybody does that every day. We're going further and further over this way, more task-based. So what's it going to do? So when I go shopping and carry all of my bags, as you can tell, somebody else does my shopping for me because my stuff doesn't fit either. But when you go shopping, right, and that lady there, she's walking it, somebody calls. Got to put the shopping down. It's not a sunny day like it is there. It's a rainy day. I've got to take that cup. Where's my phone? It's going to be so much easier if you just say, yes, hello, answer the call, whatever it is that you need to say. Is that technology here today? Yes. Absolutely. Is anybody in here a runner? Runners? You're a runner? You're a runner? Yeah, runners? Do you run? Do you use headphones? Anybody? Jeez, I can't be on my own. So you went to races. You run?
Yeah.
You use headphones?
I do.
Do you use the ones that go in your ear?
No, because they fall out.
And you can't use them in a race.
No.
You have to use the ones that go onto the bone behind your ear. And you can now use those with your phone. You say whatever you want, whatever you program it to say, you can just say something. It's there. It's here today. It's not going to be long, because you will have seen the kind of things that are happening in Sweden where they're embedding transponders into people's hands to be able to give them access to doors before we have that switch in our head. So now, you've got 5G. You don't need to actually be holding anything. You can leave it in your pocket. Start to think about the freedoms that we are going to get as a race of individuals. And then perhaps we need, and this is probably where you're going to come in, because you're not going to be dead when I am, in 2050, what about the responsibilities that that brings? So, other things that I know are happening right now, but it's worth just looking at in order to get the creative juices flowing for you. We all know that we can now send, so I like old cars, right? And old cars, it's difficult to find parts for. So what can you do now? You can get them 3D printed. But sometimes you want to actually see the thing before you get it printed. So even though I could send the file, or I could have the file sent to me to print out the component from anywhere in the world, I might want to see it first. But I'd like to see it in 3D. This is possible today. It's just expensive at the moment. So give it another couple of years and we're going to be looking at holographic displays being as common then as 3D printers are now. So imagine blueprints being presented before something is actually created and printed. Because what we do want to do is we want to save that substrate, those particles that are used to do that printing. We don't just want to throw them away because we're thinking about recycling and sustainability even more. So, last couple of bits that I just wanted to share with you. 2 data centers. So we all carry phones. The data doesn't sit on the phone, it sits somewhere else. And we're all aware of the fact that our data, our pictures, we're often made very aware that our pictures sit, for example, with Facebook. And Facebook will have a data center somewhere in the world that's full of these things, servers and storage. It's quite boring stuff, really. These two are not boring for slightly different reasons. This one is not boring because it's the most beautiful data center in the world. Now, I've been in this industry for 30 years. I stopped caring about how computers looked about 25 years ago. But this sits in a chapel in Barcelona. It's on a mezzanine floor. All of the cabling is underneath in all different colors. And it just looks spectacular. Absolutely spectacular. So that one's nice because it's pretty. This one, that's not pretty because it's German. Spanish, German. The reason that one's interesting, and again, this comes to thinking about how we behave in society today rather than just how we install technology. That one there is used to heat the building that it sits underneath because the whole thing is water cooled. So thinking more about sustainability, thinking more about how it is that we can have less impact, because one of the worst things in the world from an energy utilization perspective is a data center of that size. Small towns use less energy than those things. So if we can find a way of using less and less and less energy, all the better. So I'm just going to leave you with a couple of thoughts. If you are in the technology industry or if you're thinking about doing something with the technology industry, please do not think about the technology. It's not important. What's important is the data. The data is by far the most important asset that any of you in your organizations will ever own. And think instead about how do I actually use that data to impact my P&L in a positive way. Or if you're a charity, in order to ensure that I have a healthy surplus. Because we cannot, as we move forward, solve those problems by thinking in the way that we always have. Thank you. You're on.
Great, thank you. Super. Well, no, that's yours. I'm going to introduce you. Great, thank you. We'll chat in a bit. So we have a great converging of technology in a general sense. That's interesting. Hold that in your mind. Data coming at us in unprecedented fluency. But my question to you, which you are hopefully going to answer, Mike, is experience. The human experience in the middle of that. Is it going to give us some new experiences and desires for it? Mike Hawkyard, CEO of GainBrain. Also, you're a senior something officer. You've got the word officer in your title.
Doesn't matter.
And you play for a living. Mike Hawkyard, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to meet you all. As we're in an entrepreneur conference, I'll do a little bit of entrepreneuring first of all. 101 lesson. Hi, Angelo. I'm Mike. I work for a computer company who makes serious games. I'd love to meet you and show you what we do. Would it be possible to get your card, please? Thank you very much. So just a little gentle reminder, that's actually what you're all here to do, hopefully. So I'm Mike, shaking a little bit because today I'm talking about something that's a bit way out there. Where will games and gamification be by 2050? And I was told, go for it, Mike.
Go for it.
Go for it. Don't be boring. Tell them how it is. So I'm going to start simply. I'm going to start with esports. So esports is already bigger than sports. More people do esports, watch esports, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. At school, easily by 2050, probably by 2030, you're going to have a football team, a rugby team, and an esports team. No question about it. And we're going to be playing esports everywhere, and it's going to be the kind of cool job that all of your children and grandchildren will want to do. So esports, where's it going to end up? So I suspect one or two of you have played Fortnite.
No, never.
Judge, do any of the dances, Ed?
No, there's no comment.
Okay, so Fortnite, 1 versus 100. How many people do you think it'll be 1 versus by 2050? So at 6 o'clock on BBC One, it won't be your TV programme. You probably won't be watching TV. You'll be playing games like this, and it's going to be 1 versus everybody. Every single person who wants to play together can play together, because we'll have the connectivity, the speed, all of that will be possible. So what kind of stupid person plays games with odds like that, 1 to pretty much everyone? Surely none of us would be that stupid. Oh yeah, you all do it already. So think, games become the national lottery. You go in, you all enter, you pay your £1. They'll have some kind of reduced skill level, and they'll have luck components, so you can simply be lucky and win. And you can be the most famous person on the planet for 5 minutes by winning one of those things. And what you're going to win? Lottery-sized prizes. So why wouldn't your children want to grow these skills? Why wouldn't they want to be able to compete in this arena? Because it's going to be amazing. And the experience you get is going to be as good as real life anyway. By 2050, there is absolutely no doubt you will not be able to tell the difference between real life and a computer game. The processing will be way up there, and away you go. Which leads us on to this fellow, artificial intelligence. Does anyone here want their children to be game designers, or game programmers, or computer game related anything, other than players? Because you're shit out of luck if you do. Because we won't be making them. So, when we launch games, we do prototypes. Alpha, beta. So we've currently got Muso in Bournemouth, 10 game prototypes that we're testing for a week. A week later we'll have narrowed that to 5. A week later we'll have 2. A week later we'll have 1 that we think is really good. And even at that stage, we might throw it in the bin and go all the way back here and start again. So rapid prototyping is essential in games, especially hyper-casual games, which are the big thing at the moment. The game where you do something repeatedly, jumping up and down, and just dropping a ball through a hole, flying a bird through gaps, whatever it might be. Hyper-casual games are the big new thing. And you're trying to find a mechanic that's addictive, and you do that by A/B testing. Well, computers can A/B test better than we can. Everything's going to be digital. We're talking about digital characters, we're talking about digital experience, digital interfaces. So therefore, by 2050, who will be capable of making the best games? Computers. So you will have a game designer, perhaps, who will sit there and go, oh, I'll try this element and this element. But the computers will be building them and A/B testing them all the way through. So how does that affect us? We've got to think about, okay, if I can A/B test and I can find what's fun quicker by getting 1,000 people to play the same game, and if 51% of them jump that way here, that's the way my game should go. So we're going to get games that adapt to how you play them as you go. So I want to jump over there, right, we'll create you a game with lots of jumping. I want to shoot that, right, we'll create you a game with lots of shooting. So it's constantly going to be evolving. Gamification. So has anyone here seen what they're doing in China with gamification? Can you put your hands up if you have, or if you've heard about this? 1, 2. Okay, so in China they're gamifying their population. They would like to promote certain behaviors. So you have laws on one side, but you can't enforce every decision by a law, so you try and make certain decisions popular. Reading certain books, watching certain films, doing certain actions. And in China, they've gamified this. So if you're watching this and the government want you to watch it, you score points. If you're buying this and the government think that's a good idea, you score points. If your friends are doing things that the government thinks good, you score points. If your friends are doing things that the government thinks is bad, you lose points. Therefore, what do you do to those friends? Bye, friends. These are the people that I want to work with. But they can't do all that by law, so they're making it fun. They're making it gamified. They're giving you additional rewards for acting in certain manners. And China are ahead of us in this field, but we're catching up, and we're looking at how we can do it. And we're gamifying work, we're gamifying bank accounts, we're gamifying all sorts of things at the moment. But yeah, you can gamify populations. So when would gamification be the most important thing possible, or very important? Where would behaviors that help the group really, really make sense if we could have, oh yeah, please all do this. If you're stuck together for long periods of time. If you're going to somewhere like Mars. If you're on the space station. Can you imagine how annoying it would be, not that there's toilet seats, but if it was one of your crew that always left the toilet seat up, and you live with them for 20 years on the way somewhere, it's going to start the little things. Gamification is going to be massive for things like space travel. Really, really important, where we're in closed environments. You can't enforce people to act in certain ways, but you can reward them for doing it. And at the end of the day, your rewards might be things like this. Having a second child, having a baby, all these kind of things. Going on the spaceship to Mars, who knows? But we're going to be having such big rewards from esports and gamification that it will be at this point at some stage. So I've been reasonably safe in my predictions at the moment. So I thought I'd push it that little bit further. As a game designer, one of the key things for me is called LTV, lifetime value. This is DTV. So, we're going to get to a stage, and I think we'll appreciate this in the future, in the not too distant future, where life can be completely imitated by computers. And we're living today, right now, right at that point in time where it's just there, just beyond our reach. So imagine this lovely dog on the wall was the beginning of time. We're stepping forward from the beginning of time. And the dinosaurs, and humans, and 30 years ago the internet. And just now, just at this point in time where we truly, honestly can say, soon, we'll be able to plug things into our brains, we'll be able to potentially upload ourselves. So there's a big growth sector for you. At some point in time, we will be able to upload ourselves somehow. And we're at this point in time here that this is just out of reach. Really? What's the chances of that? But when you can upload yourself, it's going to be pretty boring, yeah? Well, what are you going to do? You're going to need an awful lot of games to keep you entertained. So therefore, my final note is DTV, death time value. I predict that the biggest customers of computer games within 100 to 200 years will be 6 foot under. It'll be you out of your body, and we'll be entertaining you and keeping you doing fun things. So I was told to push it out there. I've just pushed it to past your human's body's life. I'm going to run away now. Thank you.
Perfect. I still don't think you went quite far enough, Mike, but thank you. Shall I take that? Great. Please take a seat. Brilliant. Now we have Ed Gould and Hannah. Hannah, I'm going to get your name completely right before I say it out loud. I'm going to read it so it's right. It's Hannah Bergman Brown, which a professional would have learned before standing up. It's Hannah and Ed from Carswell Gould, who are going to be sharing a little bit about where we take it from there. Please give them a big round of applause.
We'll try and move off this very cheery slide. That's okay. Let's see. Okay, great. We're only going to take about 10 minutes. We were involved in a project recently that we're going to share with you, and it sort of touches on a lot of the stuff that these guys were talking about, but what's a bit different about what we were doing is we were trying to look at how global trends in technology might affect life on a very, very local level. So what would that mean a authority like Hampshire County Council would need to do to plan for the future? And so we were commissioned to take part in a project to do this. So my name's Ed.
I'm Hannah, and we're from Carswell Gould.
Just so that we've covered that.
Yeah.
So obviously now more than ever, and this isn't a Brexit analogy or anything, it's kind of a bit like your dinosaur walk up there. Now more than ever, we think we're at a point where we're going to need to think about these issues, because it's clear from anyone that researches any of the trends that you guys are talking about that we are on a bit of a precipice. Something's going to change, something's going to happen. So what we wanted to do is dig into this for our client and try and give them some insightful predictions, maybe, that would then allow them to plan their spend in terms of how they put their resource together as a local authority, so that society on a local level was well catered for in the future. And it all started with a bit of a forecast.
So we developed this global forecast at Carswell Gould through research that everyone there undertook. The reason it's so important is because we can't look at technology trends on their own just to predict the future. We need to look at communities, the environment, health, and lots of other things as well. So key points that I'd pull out from you are that global temperatures have gone through the roof, sea levels have risen, and all aspects of this forecast really helped us to pull together our full report.
Yeah, and it's not all doom and gloom, although we do seem, that's added at the end, to still be leaving Europe by 2050.
Yeah.
But the challenges that are put upon us from a number of different reasons need what we would class as factors. So if we think about that story about, okay, so now we're getting closer to be able to upload ourselves, who's going to do that? Who's going to be most likely to do that? Who's going to be in a position to be able to afford that technology first? And what sort of situation will that first happen in? So these came from all sorts of different sources, but a couple of the things you can see are plans that we had, like getting rid of gasoline in cars. That's come right. We've got no gasoline cars left. That's great. Unfortunately, we started it a bit late, as we know, and for that reason, sea levels have risen. So large parts of the world are now underwater, which means we've got mass migration moving into Central Europe, creating huge problems for actually making housing for those people. And so all of these sorts of things came into our project. And when we've got this global forecast, we then wanted to think about specifically for the project we were doing, how they would impact lifestyle and culture. So we're only going to talk about that. And we did lots of research, and as you can imagine, we talked it to death. We spoke to some amazing subject matter experts, which are the likes of some clients and people like Mike, although we didn't talk to you, we should have. And we collected lots of predictions and premonitions and made up stories, and then we tested them against some of our thinking by grouping them into themes.
So our 5 key themes were recreation and daily life, entertainment, arts and heritage, sport and health, relationships and family, and the creative and cultural sector. what was really interesting to me about this research is it's not something that I ever even thought about before we were asked to do it, and I never thought about how it would affect me at all. So
Just if I can cut in, but you were kind of important because, as someone else mentioned, we realised that the client would be long dead, most of the people involved would be long dead, and nobody was actually talking to the people that had a stake in this. So part of that research project, Hannah spearheaded a piece of work where they went to spoke to guys at City College, I think we did some interviews with, and some other colleges around, and we worked with a lot of colleges, because what we wanted to understand was, yeah, they might not understand all the nuances of the technology, but what do they actually want for their future? That becomes another factor that we tested this against.
So theme 1, what this is about is really how we live our lives day to day, and some of the key things that we predict is that everything's going to become more and more simulated. Things like cycling, archery, horse riding will all just start to become easier to do them in a simulated way.
Yeah, and I think the guys have touched on this. The faster technology is changing to try and solve the problems we've got, the more trickle-down value there is to people that actually might just want to use that same technology, not to bother to go and do the full cycle ride, but to do it on Strava, which exists now. But that hyper-real sensation that will be implanted by 2050 means that actually daily and recreation will change quite a lot, because we'll be doing large parts of our day-to-day routines at home, connecting up by hologram for our meetings. Now, that's great, and it's a really obvious bit that flows through that. But what we also found that was interesting in this sector in the context of a local authority is we predicted that activity centres, community centres, tech hubs, maybe schools, maybe colleges, maybe workplaces would start to blend. If you consider the context for our project, we're looking at Hampshire, lots of large areas of rural expanse. Is it realistic that they're going to put 5G into the middle of the New Forest really easily first? No. So what we were talking to them about is how you cluster those things together to actually create hubs where a lot of this stuff can work together with great server stacks underneath it, with good speed, to let the whole of the community access the benefits that technology is providing us.
So theme 2, entertainment, arts and heritage. This is all about how we access entertainment, which is obviously a very big part of lifestyle. We think possibly through the next development of VR, and we think that you'll be able to sit at the front row of a concert from your own home. And this will also create new direct channels for creators to show their work.
I mean, my son's 3 now, and I'm looking forward to forcing him to watch my favourite bands live. And by live, I mean not live. I mean simulated. And I mean I might want to play in my favourite band. And I might want to compete in a sports competition and score the winning goal for England in the '66 World Cup. It's all potentially possible. The question is who's going to build it and how that's going to work. And there's lots of people here that will build it. The other thing on the arts and heritage was also this balance. There's a dichotomy that will come on later about the role of authentic experiences versus simulated. Everything that we talk about sort of queued up this idea. And the idea of owning the Mona Lisa, or pretty much the Mona Lisa, and having it in my toilet, I know lots of people that are bourgeois enough to think that that would be the best use of bleeding edge technology. So the attainment and the access to arts and culture, technology offers us the ability to break that down and make it more available. So there's huge benefits there. The question is, how will that affect audience numbers to a real gig? Or will anyone really go to a stadium to watch Saints ever? Or, yeah, no, they won't. Football jokes is not my strong point. I'm not really a football guy. So, next one.
So a lot of what we've mentioned before is that sport and health will all start to become increasingly revolved around simulation, which will mean that real sport and exercise will become really, really important. There's already plenty of products like cycling products where people can cycle virtual routes, and we think that this is just going to increase more and more.
For us, this bit was cool as well, because when we looked at the trends moving forward, lots of people are predicting that by 2050, all of us will be a lot healthier, physically healthier. So we've already got our Instagram generation that would rather go to the gym than go and get hammered like I did as a student. As you can see, as a 19-year-old, I've weathered badly because of that. You extrapolate that on, and actually technology is going to aid greater advances in health and treatment of ailments. And actually one of the things that we predict is there'll be far more emphasis on mental health, soft health, homeopathic things, and wellness. And so we see an explosion of that by that stage, whereas actually your day-to-day ailments, many of them may have disappeared by that stage. The other thing about sports and health, which we picked up on and added to this recently, there was a piece by 2027. Anyone from Portsmouth in the room? There was a winner, he's left at the wrong time, Portsmouth. So the good news is by 2027, the last smoker in Portsmouth will die or leave. I'm not sure quite how they're leaving, but by 2050, there will be no smokers at all. So you can see these societal trends building into things that actually tie into technology. And technology can help us quit smoking by those horrible e-cigarettes that people use. So all of these ideas were grouped together in this theme to try and get us a better idea. And the other one that's up there is we predict by 2050 a quadriplegic will have climbed Everest. It's a bit of a weird one, but it's a natural progression. We've already got biosuits or armor that can go around people to enable people to actually have mobility that don't have that. It's not a big jump to be able to imagine that that will be an authentic experience someone wants to make happen. Conversely, it's not that big a jump that I want to scale Everest, but I'm not going up there. I'll use the simulated version, and then I'll share that with all of my friends in the gamification world to say I climbed it quicker than you. So we see these colliding of experiences and technology offering a simulated version of the real deal.
So theme 4 was all about how we engage with people, and we see a future where it's the norm to join meetings, to have dinner with your family via hologram, and we've already started to see a change in the normal working day with people working from home, flexible working, and we also think that this is going to present a new challenge for businesses with changing the way that they work.
How dramatic do you want me to make my next statement?
Go for it.
Some of you in this room will be having sex with robots. You may already be. I've got no idea, and I'm not going to point. I'm going to keep my hands down at this point. But relationships and family, and this theme was a really interesting one, because as technology allows us to stay closer when we're further apart, and for me to make a long-distance relationship, which always famously never worked, did they? Now they'll definitely work, because holograms will allow me to be with the people I need to be with at any time. But what then happens if I can't really be asked to be with them? And actually, the person that they're with isn't me. It's a better version of me that I've programmed and let them spend time with. These conundrums, when we think about these things that aren't completely impossible to imagine, make you think that's going to put an awful lot of stress on relationships. It's going to put an awful lot of stress on how we act, and maybe by 2050, as a prediction, we'll rely on some relationships will mean something different to us than they used to now. The other thing that comes into that sort of more dystopian thing is the rise of digital drugs, which is a big theme that's come out in a lot of predictions. And this ties into the comment earlier about the jawbone device, and more technology getting deeper and deeper immersed into what we are and how we do. Because we want frictionless payment, and we want an easy life, and I want to walk in here and my gym knows it's me and it opens the doors. I want a gym that does the weights for me as well. And it might not be, that might be a reality as well. But all of these lend themselves to the theory that by 2050 we'll be in a position where actually we'll be able to use technology to control how we physically see the world and are feeling the world. And some people are predicting by 2050, and there was a mention earlier by one of the guys around how people will be regulated. So the idea of laws and then reward, and the idea of gamification of behavior. What we also predicted during ours, which sort of matches in like that. Has anyone seen Demolition Man? Basically, all my talk is based on films that I've seen. But Demolition Man, where he keeps getting knocked off credits because he swears or he does something wrong. We see that as a very possible reality, and we also see that hyper-regulation by larger and larger companies that are owning more and more of our world. Now, about 10 companies own most of the food in the world. By 2050, I reckon about 4 companies are going to own everything. So where does that leave an authority like Hampshire County Council? And how does that leave England, Britain, Europe, whatever that used to be? And so fighting for place and space in the minds of people, these are the things that we're considering to be able to do that.
So our final theme was the creative and cultural sector. So this is everyone like designers, actors, musicians. We predict that the process-driven creative industry jobs will start to be automated or affected by technology. But then the more conceptual jobs, we think that they'll become of more higher value and be in more high demand.
So we saw a future through our work where creativity was rewarded again. We've almost lost sight of what a great artist is. I mean, a band can't even sell their music anymore. So put your hand up if you are a web developer, or you can develop, or a designer. None of you. Put your hand up if you do anything vaguely creative. What do you do?
Screenwriter, playwright.
Okay, you're all right, although you might not be alive by 2050, because he's creating something. The problem that we've got is that computers are going to increasingly do the hard labor for us. And so we're going to have to reimagine where we all fit. And it might mean that we've got a lot more spare time to go into simulated worlds and play games and various other things. The other thing that was within this round creative and cultural sector was the increase in value of certain aspects. So an artist at the moment will have to find a market, and it's quite hard. And one of the challenges for an artist is to actually find that. A big jump that will happen is the democratization and the spreading like wildfire of ideas. And when in 2050, the best thing that we've got to share with each other is ideas, which isn't much of a jump from where we are now, then we see that those people are going to reap the benefits of that. Advertising. There's a full report where you can make sense of the garbled things I'm talking about, where it goes into more detail. And actually, what we did within this project is we turned it into a story about my son Monty. And the reason that we turned it into a piece of creative writing is the idea of the future is completely hard. It's nebula. It's really hard to get your hands onto. So we wrote a story that talks about a guy that's living at that time, dealing with some of the predictions that we've dealt with. So if you want to read it, come and grab a copy or download it off our website. The thing we just wanted to finish with was just a little point around really what we were left feeling was the nub of this piece of work that we did. It's a battle between authentic versus simulated experiences. And we see that by 2050, some people may well no longer value authentic experiences and may spend most of their time in simulated state in one way or another. That's a weird thing to think about, but I've got friends that look like they're already there, to be quite honest. Conversely, we feel that where simulations become so prevalent, people that can lay their hands on an authentic experience, that will be deemed to have a higher value. So the people that actually do climb Everest will be of even more impressiveness, if it's still there and hasn't collapsed by that stage, it will be even more impressive. But even more simply than that, getting face to face to do a business deal won't be dead. There will be moments when authentic experience tops that simulated experience. And for us and for our client and the work we were doing, it was important for us to consider what's authentic about place. And in Hampshire, what do we preserve and look after? And what do we let go global? Because at the end of the day, we don't have a choice over a lot of that. But what do we want to try and keep control of? And for us, that was about authentic experiences. And with that, we'll hand over to our host, Timo. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Ed. Thank you for the blipper. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
And see you in 2050. We'll all still be heads in jars then. I want to start by asking one question to conclude. And then we're going to have a little bit of round table and a share and entertain some questions and have a little chat about what we think. First question I think comes to mind. How do you feel about all this? How does all this converging of change, the implication of the scale of transition, we as ordinary schmoes and nobodies and fools, how does it make you feel? Ruminate on it as I talk. Because the truth is, the context of technology is always the human emotional context. It's the reason you make any decisions at all. Your purchasing power, what you want to be entertained by, who you think you are. These are the real motivations that move you through your life. But technology does tend to get talked about in isolation. The theatre of tech loves to talk about the next big thing. It'll change the world, it'll wipe away the ways we used to do things, this is it. And I think that's embodied by a show like CES. Has anyone been to the Consumer Electronics Show in America? I haven't either, you have. I want to go and see what the humans there are really like. Because TV and sort of non-specialist media agencies like to just grab lazy sound bites about it's all going to be voice, or it's all going to be beacons or something. Yeah, look it up. Various things that come out because they're doing a consumer electronics show. So they're doing their job. But the implication of these changes is enormous emotionally. I think you get, I mean, guys, we can discuss this, but I think you get real disruption when you get convergence. When a series of elements that are sympathetic to an outcome all collide. And we have seen already, this morning, how much technology is converging, and it's going to make a big difference. An obvious illustration, and these guys can tell me more, would be the mobile internet. The liberation of the internet was more than 10 years ago. And that's when you got a convergence, very simply. Lots of things happened, but you had a convergence of flat touchscreen technology with small enough componentry of power in something the size of a hand, with just enough data shiftability through 3G, and you got the iPhone. And that unleashed all hell. But it also changed fundamentally, I would argue, what we are. It was a sort of evolutionary shift. And I like to think that because we're now a connected species in a way we haven't been before, and the implications of that are huge. We're only just beginning to think about it. Now, I like to think, if you think the Twitterverse is hell at the moment, I like to think that it was just taking a slightly bigger view, that it was inevitable that what humans would do first, with opening the Pandora's box of the internet, is unleash all infantile hell. Immediately we'd go to shouting at each other and photographing our balls and all the rest of it, just the most childish, basic unleashing of emotion. And that's kind of okay, because it was going to happen. How do we learn and grow up? We do it by stepping through things and changing the way we do it. It's kinetic, it's learning. There's a convergence of things much beyond tech, though, isn't there, at the moment? There are so many challenges that we're hearing about. It is bombarding. The climate crisis is the ultimate context for us, and it's worse than we think. And I don't know how to feel that properly when I say it casually. The effects of the slow collapse, in fact, the rapid collapse of the web of life, as we are observing, catastrophe is the word. It underpins us. But this little symbol, does anybody know what this is? It's the UN's global goals. The SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. It's a jolly worthy attempt at branding together an idea of the complete set of problems we're facing. Each one of those little icons has a web page with a nice little icon and very nicely described copy of a different component of the problems we're facing. So the red one is poverty, green one is environment and climate, blue one is oceans, education, sexuality. You get the picture. Each one of those components is massive in its implication. They've put it into a jolly little colour wheel of massive problems. Now, I started looking at this as a complete nobody. I'd never heard of it. And people like you and me, we're all nobodies. We're not supposed to have heard of it. It's a high-level Davos thing. And it's very well articulated. But it started to have an effect on me that sort of changed my life the more time I spent delving into it. Because I think the single greatest thing about the global goals is that it helps ordinary farty twerpy, you and me, put together everything in our minds, that it's one story. We're facing, I think, this as one of the most interesting signs. As we said earlier, mental health is a pandemic. How are we feeling about all this? Because I'd say future shock's cracking us up. Our children are carrying emotional burdens that we don't know how to process. And in single figures, the mental and emotional things they're carrying and demonstrating are horrific. I think the global goals, what they really illustrate, or any system like it that tries to put it all together, they're expressing symptoms. And I think the roundness of that logo is helpful, because I think they're symptoms of one global outlook. Globalization, neoliberal democracy, the liberal democratic system. It's all tied together. And I think they're different expressions of how they're different symptoms of one set of problems. It's not different problems, it's one outlook. You could say it's like one big story of us that's been concreted over all our differences. And that implies that we need a new one. But when we talk about futures, the future, we always go, the future, it'll be jetpacks and it'll be this and it'll be that. Well, the truth is, to split hairs, there's not one future, there's 7 billion, there's more. There's millions of futures, because there's millions of presents. When you go to a city or a town, you sort of own it emotionally. So you'll say, oh, I love London, I had a magic time there, it was great. You love London because of its emotional connection to how good the time was you had there. And somebody else will say, oh, I hate it, it's tiring, the people are rude. We went to things emotionally. I think the disruptions of our time socially are about this word. Put simply, recognition. We're all aching for it in a sea of noise. But I think this is the implication of all our component problems. I think the challenge of our age sitting here is to answer this question. What do we really value humanly, and how? What mechanisms for value do we have that are truthful to the way we actually live? Because the economic system doesn't cover it. There's no technical economic system for how the environmental systems work. It's a big, fundamental economic, cultural question about the way we've done everything. And I think it's a culture of disconnection. I think the great putting together of everything could create a rebalancing. When you think about the binification of now, the polarization that we're just seeing socially, I wonder if there's some symbolism in that great differences, in that the future's going to have lots of things in tension that seem impossible. That idea of authentic versus simulated, engaging or escaping. Balance is a word important to making sense of who we are in the planet today. This word is hugely important to us. It's important to theatre because you've got to feel placed when you turn up in a story. What's going on? Where am I? What's happening? How do I read it? Interesting, one of the balances we've got is that we are geo-agnostic as a group. That's a terrible phrase. But more and more, we don't need to be rooted to geography. You can be a digital nomad and work where you want. And at the same time, I think we're craving this emotional connection to a place. We want to use our high street. We want to buy honey from somewhere within the pollination zone. We want to feel like we belong to a community. And all at once, we can be part of really meaningful communities of people online that we don't know physically, and part of the school PTA. And both together will mean a lot to us. The word engagement is a kind of crisis for us. This is the nub of it. How will we engage? I think it starts with wanting to. And I think the emotional context of now is challenging a lot of us to simply want to bother. My generation, our generation, has kind of been asleep. Generation X, we looked at all the problems and went, I don't believe in any of it. I think we're waking up. And the technology of engagement will make the difference, but we'll be readier to drive it. The truth of things, authentication is going to be very important. That's where blockchain and Bitcoin can go round old systems of guesswork and gossip, and we can find our own sense of empowerment. And when we do, going up to a monument in town and finding out all the planning history of it directly, verifiably, we will find physically walking through that with this technology, we'll find ourselves wedding to it more emotionally. And that means to political systems at the local, the national, and the global level. And so we'll find a greater emotional sense of connection, potentially. We're going to have to. That will lead us to this word. When you own something, you care about it. We're trying to wake up to owning what's going on around us. Owning the challenges coming, described here in technical terms. Owning it emotionally and wanting to do something about it that's authentic to us. Tension. There'll be a lot of impossible tensions ahead, and that's part of how we'll surf it, I think. It's okay. This, I think, is my final challenge. We've kept everything in separate boxes. We've expected governments to do things for us. We've expected leaders to tell our stories, and we can sign up to it. The technology arguably will liberate us. In hand with crises, to make us face this, we can no longer outsource our courage. It's up to us. It's up to us. Thank you. Okay, to close up, let's get the gang together. Can we pull the tub chairs forward and have just a quick discussion? I want to throw it open to any questions. Can you drag them forward? Right, we've got two mics between us. So I just want to ask first, pass the mics along. All the stuff you know, all the expertise you have, the things we've seen at our age especially, and you as well, Hannah, how do you feel about it all?
That's not much of a question. I think, I'm hugely encouraged by people of Hannah's age, because I think they're making more sense of the world today than we ever did. Because I think what's happened is that our view of the world has expanded such that we can no longer take it all in. And with the way in which they look at the world today, they can capture more of it and be able to address it, because they're not thinking about necessarily the physical movement from one place to another. It's more virtual. So you're able to condense that and bring it into your mind. So I think the world in many ways, whilst it's often simulated today, is more real to the younger people than it was to us. So I don't know, Hannah, whether you would agree with that or whether I just talked a load of old tosh.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting for me, as it will be my future. So yeah, it's been good to research and predict what it might be like. But yeah, I found it really interesting.
What do you think as you look forward? What do you think as you look forward?
As I look forward, I think everything that everyone has said is a possibility, but I guess we don't really know, do we? So yeah, I do.
Do you feel excited by the challenge?
Bit of both, yeah.
I feel fine, thank you. I feel very excited and positive. I think that it is what it is, and I think there's a lot of navel gazing at things like this. I think that we go, oh, it could do this or it could do that. For us, it's sort of forewarned. What's that expression? Forearmed is forewarned. You know, us doing that the other way around. That's why you're a writer. That's right. But us doing that piece of work is not navel gazing. It's a commercial thing to say, what do we need to be ready for? What could we go in a direction of? Where can we get some good ideas from? Which is really important in my business. But nothing that, you know, if you think about, oh, does the future worry me? No, because you just fall into the pit of despair that the government would have us fall into. Mike, over to you. How do you feel?
Thank you. There's no point looking for monsters under the bed, so let's only worry about the things that we can do stuff about. I'm very excited by the future because it's going to change, and I'm massively frustrated to be born now, to be honest, because in 100 years' time, can you imagine how cool it's going to be? If we're not there now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel a sort of clear enough head to feel excited. I think there's something inevitable, actually, about positive things coming out of this. And that's partly because it's a convergence of technology just at the point when we've got a convergence of crises. And that could crack us out of a status quo. It's a big, there's opportunity there like never before. You should be excited. We should. Plus, none of us are going to die. We're going to be heads in jars, probably, anyway, uploaded. So please do some good games. Has anyone got a question or a query or something they'd like to say? Yeah, let me come back to you.
Thanks very much. So, kind of directly leading on from that, I think you've all sort of touched on the need to think and work at different scales. But there still seems to be that sort of tension between, on the one hand, we need to have this systemic change, this desire, almost utopian desire for major change, but equally we want to sort of stay with the trouble and keep with those local issues, local ideas. And how do you see us navigating this potential for, you know, crises leading to change, but those who get lost along the way? I know, as the title of the session was, you know, the tech giants and the billionaires are sort of getting ready to jump ship, and what about all those normal people who are going to get potentially lost in the way?
That's really the question. What about the normal people? Ed, I'm chucking it to you.
I don't know any normal people. I know people that profess to be normal people, but I think we're all pretty weird in our own wonderful way. And I think the thing in context to your question is, wasn't it ever thus? Weren't we always in a position where things would move forward and some people might get left behind and some people... And the only reason that someone thinks that they've been left behind is because someone's there saying that they were right and the other lot were wrong. The stuff that shifts underneath us is the tools and the environment that we live in. And I guess what we were trying to talk about was whether we can shape that in a way that we felt would be more positive for us and our children and our children's children, specifically here in this area. During that research, during that project, we certainly saw some huge challenges where it felt like it wasn't just people that might get left along the way, it might be whole communities, countries, continents, and the role between government versus commerce, and how you can put up a slide of a much more well-attended event than our event at the computer gaming thing, thanks for that, but you can get that many people in a room looking to their gods that are companies, and not... That's what's really kind of cool about it, but also quite scary.
Angela, what do you think?
Well, Ed, you've obviously read American Gods.
I haven't.
Man, you need to. You just described it. So I think that to try and answer your question specifically, rather than go off at a tangent, the worry about some people being left behind as this strange new world kind of comes around, is that what you were talking about in essence? Because I think there's a couple of ways of looking at it, and one of the things that I've found fascinating as I've travelled the world is I've been very fortunate to go to some countries which would be considered to be third world, some countries that would be considered to be second world, and one could argue that those countries were left behind as the first world countries progressed. As we see global communications increase, we see individuals in those countries wanting more, because they can see it on the TV, even if they're all, 50 of them going down to the bar and drink some hooch and watch one TV, they're seeing this and they want it. It's perfectly reasonable for a human being to want something else in order to, they think, better themselves. So I think we've had that problem already. I think that problem may become somewhat more localized, so there may be people in local villages that may get left behind. So I think it will probably come down to how much we globalize our village, as to how much countries, cities, towns, groups of people get left behind. And also, if that goes, let's call it in the right direction, then it will become a matter of choice as to whether somebody wants to get involved in this new world, or whether they want to be able to get on their bicycle and go out for a ride in real life rather than jumping into a cubicle or jacking in. And if you've not read it, the whole jacking in thing, read Neuromancer by William Gibson, and that will describe what life is likely to be like in games in the future.
Hannah, when you were looking at all the social stuff in the project, Hampshire 2050, what struck you about the social challenges that you were sort of predicting in amongst all that?
Really that there'll be less face-to-face communication, but I think we will find a way to get through that, I guess. I think people do value face-to-face conversation rather than all of these ways that there are to communicate with people. I think we'll choose to, rather than, we will be able to do all these other things, but I think we will choose to speak face-to-face.
Yeah, interesting. Mike, did you have any thoughts on social issues, or are you just planning another game?
No, I'm good on this one, thanks.
I think the challenge is how many people will suffer and for how long in a time of transition. It's a massive question. Whole communities at the moment are just dead-ended by our economics, is the truth. So if you ask this question, us lot here go, I'm quite excited about it. This is great. Let's do new things. We can overturn the system. We're used to being a bit entrepreneurial, creative. We've got enough money in our pocket that we can have a few choices. Whole communities are going, the entire system was a lie. It's not worked for me. And that's people with jobs. That's people working hard. That's where populism's getting its energy from. So that's a question. Will our democracy radicalise more, where we start to think, democracy is not for me, it's something I give to someone else? That's a big social flip, but will the crisis of resources flip that in our heads? Will we have a polar flip like we have potentially with the planet? Good question. It's a big open-ended thing for us to think about. Another question, yes.
Thank you. I thought it was fascinating, each and every one of you. I thought it was brilliant and really exciting and terrifying all at the same time. And one thing that wasn't mentioned but was clearly implicit is the privacy, people's privacy in all of this, and whether it's not even going to be a choice anymore, and you just need to surrender your privacy. And for the people who don't want to do that and have worked hard not to do that. Is it going to be moving to a log cabin in the Arctic Circle, and is that even going to be a choice anymore?
Privacy, man, it's huge. Mike, would you give up your privacy?
I think privacy will be a financial commodity. So, say Monzo at the moment. Monzo know what I buy. Monzo know where I go. Monzo know what I like. And that information is very valuable. So what do they do with it? Well, a normal bank gives you interest. So if they enabled me to sell my privacy as an option of just tick the box, and therefore all these people will know, and I got paid personally for letting them know about me, then all of a sudden I'm getting more money in my bank, so I can go and spend more money on the things I like by telling the people that want to know that I like this, that, yeah, I'm interested. So I think it will flip the other way as well, but I think privacy will be, in the future, one of the most valuable commodities that you can choose to sell, and you can, not the companies who you're giving your data to, you can decide if you want to do that or not.
So I guess a question is, where do we invest in the future? If this is an entrepreneurial zone, where would you guys invest in next? Where's the place of entrepreneurism in the face of these crises?
Oh, I think the man on the end selling cloud technologies sat in a very good place right now, because the more stuff that gets uploaded, the more data we need. It's going that way, definitely. But you never know. I had a friend who got a job working for a 3D graphics company, one of the big ones, and he got his job and they weren't doing very well, and all of a sudden his sales rocketed and he was like, wow, look at all the money I'm making. Because of cryptocurrency. Nothing to do with what they expected at all. And all of a sudden he's got 10 times more graphic cards going out the door and has done absolutely nothing. So technology will be one of those things that you're going to get lucky on. It just turns out we need it. It's all going to be processing power and storage in the end. So, I mean, air conditioning, cooling, land in cold places, all sorts of different ways around it. But to me, it's that.
Ed, what would you say?
Well, I can talk about personally. I'll talk about the context of that project, which we were trying to ascertain what a authority should invest in the context of this, and it actually touches on your privacy thing. What we suggested that they should invest in one of the suggestions was technology blackout zones, so that there is enough of an audience who will still want some privacy, albeit that I'm sure they won't really have any. But the illusion and the simulation of privacy and getting back to your roots was something that we actually recommended that the council could invest in to safeguard something like the New Forest, where you could actually drive into that, all connectivity gets switched off. They could, yeah, I know, yeah, but it's good that you'll actually have to go to the office. But initiatives like that on a local level, we thought that was a good investment because it would actually mark them out to have something notably different about place in that context. We also made a load of recommendations around hubs and technology hubs that blend schools, colleges together, because it would be a lower cost investment for an authority or a government to make, and it's sort of tied into the nature of the changing needs of people. I drop my 3-year-old off at nursery and then I come to Southampton and I live in Bournemouth. I would rather go next door where he works, do my work there, break down that a bit, and so we looked at those sorts of things in our project.
That's interesting. Angela, I mean, working for Lenovo, they've invested heavily in all the things you've been describing. Great job so far. What about going forward? And you personally, what's your hunch about where to invest?
In terms of Lenovo, there are some very boring answers, like edge technology and stuff like that, which I'll happily describe to people if they have no ability to sleep. From a personal perspective, there is a very simple answer. Because I think that artificial intelligence is still a long way from becoming reality. I think that... do you know where HAL came from, by the way?
It's IBM.
It's one letter before IBM. Robotics. If you're looking to invest money, put it into robotics, because the hard work's been done now. Now it's marketing that which is available that's important. So if anybody's got any robotics jobs going, I'm interested. In order to answer your question about privacy, though, I think that we shortchanged you slightly. I often listen with frustration to the radio. I'm a great Radio 4 listener, and I hear people blaming the internet, which is a bit like blaming a piece of paper. It's the people who write on it that is the problem, rather than the medium. And I think the same is true of privacy. If we go back a few hundred years, there was no privacy in the village. There would always be one old hag who'd know everything. Or there'd be the one villain who would steal things, right? And it's exactly the same now. I think there is no such thing as privacy anymore. I would go that far. But the only time you need to worry is when someone has stolen it, and they're going to be using it against you. But in terms of privacy for privacy's sake, go invest in log cabins, mate.
That sounds like a good thing to me, and that's a nice punchline out, I think. Unfortunately, we've got to leave it there. I could chat all afternoon, but thank you for attending and bringing your brains and your minds to this. Guys, thanks so much for all the thinking and sharing and pooling of ideas, to Angelo, to Hannah, to Ed, and to Mike. And to me, it's been a really nice space to just start a discussion, go away and plan some homework and share stuff online. Many thanks indeed. Cheers.